remember, 42 states, I think, are not competitive. 42 states if it's a close election. So for 42 states, you already have got an electoral count. There's at least one scenario where the outcome could be 269 to 269. So that's one of the reasons New Hampshire is important. The other reason, I'm speaking as an outsider, but New Hampshire voters is a bit contrarian. And the worst thing you can do is take them for granted. And I don't think that I don't really understand Biden's decision to change the primary calendar. I do understand it in terms of moving Iowa out of the queue. I think there is a potential collateral cost in the general election. And you can look at New Hampshire and how it swung wildly from one party to the other, as have all these other states. Just remember, 95 out of 100 senators are of the same party as the presidential candidate who carried their state in the last presidential election. There are only 23 congressional districts out of 435 in which you have a representative different than the presidential candidate who last carried their district. So we are moving, in the census data that came out this week shows how we are basically choosing to live around people just like ourselves. And so it's these outliers like a New Hampshire, like was demonstrated in 2022, that's why they're so important, because the rest of the country is so evenly and narrowly divided.
The fact that third-party candidates, the Libertarian Gary Johnson, the Green Party candidate Jill Stein, they both respectively tripled their vote share between 2012 and 2016 when we saw an election between historically the two most unpopular nominees in American history. And as a result, voters went running and they gave 3% of the vote to Gary Johnson, 1% to Jill Stein. There's a pretty coherent argument that Jill Stein vote in particular may have cost Hillary Clinton the election. Now the chatter is about the threat of a no labels candidate. You already talked about the potential for Cornel West to play a little bit of a spoiler role here. I guess a two-part question. How worried should Democrats be at this point about the emergence of a strong third-party candidate? And what if that third-party candidate is a clearly identifiable Republican? Let's say Chris Christie were to change course and say, I'm going to run as an independent just to take down Trump. Would that make any difference?
Well, look, let's go back. Just first of all, I think that people were assuming in 2016 they could have it both ways, where Trump wasn't going to win and they could go out and vote for a third, fourth, or fifth party and be able to express their dissatisfaction without having to have Donald Trump as president. So I think a lot of people learned a hard lesson then. And you can see how that impacted 2020, where people understood that we're voting for a third party candidate was not free. There was a cost to that. So I think Democrats in general should worry about a third party, only because a binary race between Trump and whoever is such an advantage for Democrats. Because of Trump's support is somewhat narrow, but quite deep, but it restricts his ability to get 50% of the vote, as I mentioned earlier. So if you look at back to your Christie question for a moment. So if you look at third-party candidates, meaningful third-party candidates since 1980, if it's a center-right candidate, it helps the Democrats. And if it's a center-left candidate, it helps the Republicans. So a Christie center-right third party would accrue to the benefit significantly for Democrats.
When we interviewed our old friend Jeff Pollock, the noted Democratic pollster, I said to him, hey man, it seems like presidential approval rating isn't saying what it used to say, that people are essentially doing what you talked about a moment ago. In 10 of the last 12 elections, they've essentially had this thermostatic reaction of, I don't like what's happening, I'm voting for the other side. Now I don't like what's happening, I'm voting for the other side. It feels to me like when you see President Biden get 41, 42% approval rating, and you see something like 70% of America say, we're off on the wrong track. They're not necessarily telling pollsters, hey, I'm unhappy with Joe Biden, quad Joe Biden. It feels to me like what they're saying is, I'm unhappy. There's something that is clearly amiss. And if you look back, you noted that Gallup has been in this game since the beginning. For about 50 years now, they've been running their version of right track, wrong track. I can't remember exactly how they word it. But what you find is that the median number of respondents who say things are on the wrong track over the last 50 years is about 2/3 of America. Americans seem to have become deeply unhappy. So looking more broadly beyond just 2024, what do you think is going on? Is America being ailed by deeper forces that are making us unhappy and that our politics seem unable to address?
I would take a broad middle ground, which is to say, I think it is a valuable tool, but it used to be the Holy Grail, and it's no longer the Holy Grail. Politics is a lagging indicator of what's going on in America. It's not a leading indicator. And so it's in many ways a reflection of how people have felt in the past, not what they're going to think in the future. So I think this stems from back to that transformation I mentioned earlier, away from a manufacturing economy. I think that this has been going on for 50 years now. It started with the decline of the middle class. Currently, according to Pew, they came out last year with an analysis. 50% of the country is now considered middle class. It was 61% 25 years ago. And so for a lot of people, there's been a long economic decline in their fortunes. And it's particularly people on the old saying about the American dream, where you graduate from high school, don't go to college, have a good paying job. Used to work in Michigan. These were guys that worked on the line, and they would have a cabin up north and a boat. Those are the people that have been punished economically in this economic transition. This is the core of people that were Democratic who voted for Obama in 2008, 2012, who supported Trump in 2016 and continue to this day. But so it's a series of things, though, for this group of people who are battered now. One is the economic decline. Secondly, this group was by far the hardest hit in the 2008 economic crisis. This group was hit hardest by COVID. This group has been hit hardest by inflation. And so there's a general sense for an increasing number of people in this country that they've lost control of their lives and that this stuff is happening to them. And that's what creates this overwhelmingly sour mood that is now baked in now for 2 decades.
Oh, it's really interesting. It also gives me concern that the new push from the White House to sell the term Bidenomics is not going to work. Let me get you out of here on this. How do you feel? How should Democrats feel at this stage in terms of the chances of beating Trump and, let's not put too fine a point on it, avoiding an absolute catastrophe for America? We had the pollsters who do a very well-designed poll in New Hampshire, and as you outlined, the state-based polls are more significant. On the show last week, they found that at this stage of the game, not just that Biden is ahead of Trump 49-40, but also that there are really no arguments that voters find particularly salient as negative arguments about Biden, except for his age. So there are limited lines of attack. And I argued, hey, based on this, at least in New Hampshire, Democrats should feel pretty good. So how do you feel at this stage in terms of your confidence, and what could happen that would make you feel either significantly better or significantly worse?
As a Democrat, I have conflicting views about this, but I feel in this unsettled environment, a bit of a sense of foreboding about the future. On the negative side is, of course, age is a potential issue, and it could be played out in a variety of different ways with Biden. And Harris's poll numbers right now don't give Democrats reassurance that if for whatever reason Biden doesn't run again, that she steps in and can do that. I also have certainly a level of respect for the power of Trump that I certainly did not have in 2016. And I never thought he'd be like the president. I never saw it coming. It seemed inconceivable to me. I was much more guarded. So I wrote an article in 2017 in the Washington Post where Trump is 38% job approval and whatever. I wrote an article saying he's well on his way to getting reelected. And while I did not think he was going to win in 2020, I was very concerned about the power of his candidacy, both as a candidate, but also his ability to appeal to voters. And again, he didn't really persuade many people to vote for him in 2020 that didn't vote for him in 2016, but he increased, I think, by 7 million the number of people who voted for him. And those were people who hadn't voted in the past. And there's still a deep pool of those people in these 8 states that he can draw upon. So that also gives me a lot of heartburn about Trump. On the positive side, Trump is doing everything possible to alienate all but his hardcore voters. And so if you look at suburban voters, you look at independent voters, you look at moderate-ish, whatever you want to call them, Republican voters, he's doing everything possible to not get their vote. So that's on the positive side. So if you net all that out, I would say I have, at best, cautious optimism about the future. At best.
Doug Sosnik, thanks so much for all of your wisdom, all of your guidance, all of your analysis. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me.